Hi everybody. So the whole victim concept it's a difficult topic because I did mention that the person who accuses you of playing the victim is normally the abuser. The person who normally plays the victim is also normally the abuser. And they will accuse the person who they have damaged, harmed, hurt, destroyed, betrayed, of committing whatever atrocity it is that they themselves committed, and play the victim. They will pretend it was the victim who actually harmed them. So it's a strange concept. And I say normally because it's not always the case. You know, one can never say everything is an absolute. The only thing that is absolute is that you will die. But the rest of everything is subject to circumstances, dependencies, personalities, so on and so forth. So, if it's the abuser who accuses you of playing the victim, and then they proceed to play the victim, essentially all they're doing is trying to take the focus off themselves. Because very often, the abuser knows full well what they've done. And they have to protect their oh so important reputation. Because if they play victim, then your story, which is the truth, becomes watered down. And they hope to cast a weary eye on you to say, well, no, actually, they did it to me. This isn't what happened. And they muddy the waters. And it's a very narcissistic character trait. It really is. What happened to me, I didn't even know what was true, what was real, what was false anymore. I was accused of being the abuser. I was accused of being the betrayer. I was accused of theft. And the actual abuser was the person doing the accusing. And he ran around and told all the family members what I allegedly had been doing. And when they confronted me, I said to them, well, audit everything. Audit everything. I've done nothing. And at the end of the day, I am the one with the black mark on my name, while the abuser runs around acting like a hero. And I lived in fear for probably 2 years because of the way he had threatened me, because he actually wanted me gone. He tried to have me institutionalized as insane. That was how far the abuse went. So, yeah, I lived in fear for 2 years. I watched my back constantly. And there was nothing I could do about it. You know, I had no evidence that he was stalking me because he had his little mates doing it for him. So, was I playing the victim? No. But he certainly did. I was actually the real victim in the whole thing. Did I behave like a victim? Well, yeah, sometimes. Sometimes. It gets very scary when you're going somewhere and you see a vehicle that's following you and you're not quite sure if it happens to be the nasty brute You go to places where he probably knows you will be, and you've got to worry about, is the miserable skunk going to pitch up? Because his vehemence was off the wall. And the worst part was, I wasn't even fighting. He got his spoils. He inherited a property that he doesn't want. And ultimately, I walked away from it. And yet he still wanted to abuse me, which, by the by, is actually a narcissist. People with narcissistic personality disorder don't like losing their supply. They don't like losing the person who will bend over backwards for them. The fact that he happened to be a relative made it worse. Because, you know, there's this familial bond that, oh, you have to love your family. I've never heard more tripe in my entire life. You do not have to love your abusers. Ever. You do not have to. Not, oh, forgive them. They're your mother, they're your father, they're your brother, they're your sister. Oh, forget it. I've got a lot of choice words for that. But the victim, what happens when one's life has been a shit show at the hands of other people? What happens to you as an individual? I don't know what happens to you. I know what's happened to me. I got to the point where I don't want to try anymore because everything I worked for was ripped out from under me. I lost everything that I'd worked for. I'd lost my investments. I lost everything at the hands of family, or what they like to call family. You know, those people that stick their genes into you even though you didn't want to be a part of them. So, what happens? Well, I gave up. And I got to the point where, when I was moving into that hideous brother's stolen property, I was going to cater for all my animals. There was a domestic living there who would feed them and look after them. And I was going to terminate because there's no point. And then I met the most incredible human being I've ever known. And he loved me. Or so I thought. He was going to marry me. Or so I thought. At long last, somebody wanted me. And then one day he didn't. And I've now spent 2 years trying to get over it. Trying to make life better. You know, they say, oh, just let it go, move on. Let it go. Well, I suppose if you have a lot of love in your life, it's very easy to let one disaster go. But when you've had disasters your whole life, and you meet someone who actually wants you, and they leave, it's a shit ton harder. So where am I at this point? Well, I don't want to anymore. I don't want to. I don't play the victim. The majority of the people who know me think everything's hunky-dory. I don't tell anybody what's going on in my life. I have one friend who communicates with me regularly. Other people, there are people who I'm very fond of. They live too far away. But for the most part, I'm on my own. And of course I have my animals. And every day I have to do everything on my own. I've injured my foot, and my friend said to me, well, you shouldn't be walking on it. And I said to him, well, one day when I figure out how to walk without my foot, I'll do that. Because I don't have anybody to help me. I don't have anybody who is going to go and buy food, is going to feed the feral animals, is going to feed my own animals. I don't have anybody who's going to take care of me. I'm on my own 99.9% of the time. The only time I'm not on my own is when I make an effort to go out and be in among, for the most part, strangers. So, am I a victim of life? Yes. Because, life has ups and downs. Life has ups and downs. And I was taught to suck it up, buttercup. Chin up. I don't want to be known as the person who can take a hit. I don't want to be known as the person who nothing gets them done. And unfortunately, that's who I am. I'm the one who I can't afford not to get up, work, look after myself, take care of things. Because if I don't do it, nobody else is going to. If I don't earn income, I cannot feed myself. I will not have a roof over my head. That's all there is to it. I don't have any backup at all. And if I slip in the shower and bang my head and concuss myself and bleed to death, the only ones who will know are my cats. And eventually my landlord. Probably because of the stench. But short of that, there's nobody. So, what's the point? That's where I am. Am I a victim of life? Do I behave like a victim? No. 99% of the people who see me, who speak to me, who know me, who associate with me, even passingly, would never guess. They would never guess. I am so well trained that I get up in the morning and even when there's no electricity, I clean my body, I wash my hair, I make my bed, I wash the dishes, I feed the animals, I feed myself. And people say to me, gosh, you've lost weight, you must eat. And I say, well, I do eat. I am extremely well trained. I'm almost like a regimented army person because I'm like clockwork. You can literally set your clock to me. That is how well trained I am. And yeah, I believe it's the formative years that was screwed up by so-called parents who didn't actually give a shit. Because I never learned how to play. I feel guilty. I feel guilty if I'm not working. I feel guilty if I do nothing. I feel guilty. So if I'm not working, I'm cleaning or doing laundry or feeding ferals or organizing something or planning something to try and figure out a way to earn an income. And of course, all the time, 24/7. And trust me, it's 24/7. I'm trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with me. What the hell is wrong with me? What have I done to be outcast the way I am? You know, a few weeks ago, a so-called friend woke me up in the middle of the night, as drunk as a lord. And I'd spoken to her previously and said to her, I don't do alcohol. I can't stand the smell. And I certainly do not do drunks. I don't mind if you drink. Do it on your own time. Anyway, she woke me up in the middle of the night, banging on my window. And I let her into the house. And she seemed to be in a very upset state. And I tried to speak with her. And while she was sitting, she was still drinking. And she drank a full glass of what looked like neat whiskey to me. And then she proceeded to vomit. And I was still tolerant of that. And then she got the most malicious look on her face when she grabbed my bath towel and wiped the vomit off her face and her hands onto my bath towel. And it was the look. It wasn't the wiping of the vomit. It was the look of malicious, nasty intent that turned me cold. And I looked at her and I said to her, listen, you've had far too much to drink. You need to go and sleep it off. And I tried to help her leave. I tried to help her leave. And she fell more than once. And she's a big woman. I helped her up. One time, the second time I couldn't because it was dead weight. And next thing I know, she's screaming and swearing at me and calling me names and telling me what a heap of rubbish I am. And I tried to phone her partner to try and get help to get her home. But of course, his phone was off, he was fast asleep, whatever. You know, like most people are at that time of the night. And this woman firmly believes that it's my fault. It's my fault because I let her into my house. It's all my fault. So you draw your own conclusion on that. You draw your conclusion on how someone who was fast asleep becomes a guilty party to somebody else's abuse. Because I don't understand it. I don't understand how I'm always on the receiving end of bullshit. How people think taking advantage of me is a great idea and then proceed to abuse me. So, yeah, playing the victim? No, I don't play the victim. I don't even mention it 99% of the time. I've been battling to do this part on playing the victim because I haven't wanted to make anyone feel bad. I mean, how pathetic am I? Somebody hurts me and I don't want to say anything about it. How does that even work? Then, of course, we have the perpetual victims. The perpetual victims are the people who actually have absolutely no excuse. They are not willing to do what they need to do to survive. They lie around. They take drugs. In fairness, A lot of drug abusers start taking drugs to get rid of pain, emotional pain. I get that, because it's not fun. But that's not where we're going today. But a lot of people start taking drugs, and they blame everyone for what's going wrong in their life. But they never try. They never try. They don't get up and try and make something of their lives. I was in a small city just up the road, and there's a homeless shelter, and there were a whole bunch of people sitting outside the homeless shelter. And I said to my friend, it's really sad that those people are there. They weren't begging. They weren't doing anything. They were literally just sitting there. And he said to me, yeah, those people have given up. And if you were to give them 100 million rand, they would spend it as quickly as they could. And before you wipe the shit out of your eyes, they will be back there. Because they don't want to try. Because life has been so particularly horrible that eventually they give up. But they don't play the victim. They're just waiting to die. That's literally what they're waiting to do. The ones that play victim are the ones that are constantly telling you how hard their life is, and oh, woe is me, and would you give me 100 rand so that I can buy myself a bottle of whiskey? Would you buy me some food? I don't have any food. And then you get them food and they say, oh no, I don't eat that. Those people don't try. They don't make an effort. They live in a perpetual victim state, in spite of the opportunities that they have, in spite of anything you try to do to help them. You can even try and open a business with one of them, and you will find that at the end of the day, all they actually want is somebody to give them money. We have a huge population in South Africa like that. A huge population in South Africa like that. They want you to give them everything. They don't want to work for anything, nothing. They feel entitled to it because, oh shame, over 30 years ago, blah, blah, blah happened. Therefore, 30 years later, you must give me your hard-earned whatever. It's also partly a criminal mindset, except the criminal isn't a victim. The criminal's just an abuser. He's a thug. And his method of getting what he wants is to take it. But perpetual victims, South Africa, there are millions of them. There are millions of them. I was speaking to a domestic helper, and she said to me, one of her family members has got 6 children, and she's always crying because the children are hungry. And she has turned around and told that family member, stop having children. If you can't afford to feed them, stop having them. It is not my problem if you have 6 children and you can't afford to feed them. It is nobody's problem except yours and, of course, your children's. And why would you expect a handout? If you're smart enough to breed, then you're smart enough to feed them. And if you're capable enough to breed, then you have the strength to work. So work. Earn your income. Earn the money that you're going to put in those children to give them the chance at a better life. But unfortunately, the entitled don't see it that way. The victim mentality strikes to the extent where it says, oh, well, I've got 6 children and government needs to give me money to feed them. And this one needs to give me money. And I mean, it's like a pandemic in South Africa. People hire their children out so that other people can stand on street corners with babies and beg. And people give them money because shame, they're there with a baby. The sad part of it is, this has been going on for 50 years, 40 years. And they're syndicates. These people are driven in, they bust in. They make a small fortune on the streets. It's actually a vocation. And then they go and claim their government grant, which the ever-dwindling tax population pays. Because the tax population is dwindling more and more. And eventually, South Africa will end up in the doldrums. Because once the taxpayers leave, there won't be any more people to continually sponsor the perpetual victims. The perpetual victims will discover that owning land does not turn into food. They will discover that sitting in a garden that belongs to them does not feed their families. You cannot grow a vegetable unless you plant the seed. The seed won't grow if you don't water it. But the logic and the mindset isn't there. And it doesn't matter how much you try and teach them. They don't want to work. Perpetual victims. And yes, they come across all race categories. All race categories. All sexes. It doesn't matter if you he, she, it, them, they, whatever. Red, black, pink, orange, green, brown, purple, it doesn't matter. Those people exist across all categories, and they actually have the opportunities. They just don't take them because they don't want to work. They don't want to work. They feel entitled. So, what is a victim? Well, I don't know. I understand the victim of crime and natural disasters. I understand the victim of betrayal. I also understand the victim survives very often. They will never be the same again. They will never be the same after whichever disaster it is that took them out at the kneecaps. There will always be a residual of that trauma, that event. But they will survive. Or maybe they won't. Maybe they won't want to. Me? I don't want to anymore. I don't want to anymore. I'm not a victim. I am a survivor. I have always picked myself up, dusted myself off, and carried on. I've had no choice. I've never received a handout. I've never benefited off the back of somebody else's work. And I refuse to beg. So even in the rescue work that I do, I don't beg for food donations for the feral animals because I feel humiliated asking people to reach into their pockets to help animals that they aren't responsible for. And you know what? I'm not responsible for those animals either. I assigned myself responsibility for them because someone's got to do it. But I can't bring myself to beg. Yes, during the COVID pandemic, I was forced to. But I would rather not eat for a week and feed all the animals that need to be fed than put posts up on social media begging for assistance with animal food. And don't get me wrong, I do have one or two people who do assist every so often. But I am not a victim. I actually think I'm too full of shit to be a victim. I think I have too much of a backbone from standing up for myself my entire life to be a victim. It's not in my makeup. But I don't want it anymore. I can't see any point in building up a new life when at the end of the day nobody's going to want me anyway. At the end of the day it's going to be me and my animals. And I will perpetually be working to try and survive. And when I injure myself, I will continue using whichever body part is injured because I haven't got anyone to help me. Do I play the victim? No. No. I educated myself. I got myself 2 different degrees. And of course the education system and the regulatory bodies and so on and so forth have all got their own bullshit rules that they won't allow you to practice. Because suddenly you have to qualify in 60,000 other things. And then you have to do continual hours, and in South Africa you have to do community service. Pray tell, why do you have to do community service when you've spent 7 years doing veterinary science? Why do you have to give back to the government? They didn't give you your education. What is wrong with that? What is wrong with it? So you spend an absolute fortune educating yourself, and then you have to give away a year of your life to a government that doesn't give a shit about you anyway, and is going to tax you at the end of it anyway. So, yeah. So I do what I can to survive. But victim shaming? No, I won't do it. I won't do it. There are people who never get over it. There are people who sit outside of shelters waiting to die. They're literally waiting to die. They don't try at all anymore. I might wake up every morning thinking, fuck, I'm alive. But when I wake up alive, I try. Those people, they don't try. They don't try anymore. And I understand why. Because sometimes it just isn't worth it. Sometimes there's just no point. Anyway, I hope you have a great day.